Listen, family, because the story I am about to unpack is the kind of receipt-stacked, jaw-cracking, entire industry-shaking exposé that only drops once every few years, and tonight the target of the smoke is none other than Drake himself, because a certain someone we all thought was locked in his corner has just kicked the door off the hinges and told the world exactly what Drake has allegedly been cooking behind the curtain. And it involves Rihanna, it involves A$AP Rocky, it involves paid bloggers, it involves a sabotage plot so cold-blooded that even the loyalists are now backing away with both hands up. Buckle in, because this one is nuclear. Here is where it gets loud. The whistleblower is Sexy Red. Yes, that's Sexy Red. The same Sexy Red who was photographed all hugged up on Drake not that long ago, the same Sexy Red who publicly rode for Drake when the entire internet was throwing dirt on his name during the Kendrick Lamar warfare, the same Sexy Red who Drake dressed up on his own Instagram like she was already picked out and paid for. That Sexy Red has now allegedly flipped, and according to what she is putting into the atmosphere, Drake has been quietly funneling money to bloggers and industry mouthpieces to push a very specific narrative, the narrative that A$AP Rocky is a cheating, uncommitted, deadbeat partner who cannot be trusted around Rihanna. In other words, if you have wondered why your feed has suddenly been flooded with mysterious little stories accusing A$AP Rocky of doing Rihanna dirty, the whisper on the block is that those stories did not sprout from thin air. Somebody allegedly watered them. Somebody with a checkbook. Somebody named on this very timeline. And before anyone types, "Prove it," in the comments, understand why this claim landed like a haymaker instead of a paper airplane. Sexy Red was one of the last artists still standing publicly in Drake's foxhole. If she is now emptying her cup on his behalf, that is not gossip anymore. That is a defection. That is an inside voice saying out loud what an entire audience has been suspecting for years. That math ain't mattering for anybody trying to defend the man tonight. Now let's pump the brakes and lay out the receipts, because Drake fans are already loading their fingers to type, "He moved on years ago, leave him alone." Really? Because the paper trail says otherwise, and Drake's own catalog is the loudest witness against him. On Fear of Heights, Drake stood in the booth and tried to convince the whole planet that Rihanna was never the one, that he was never that pressed, that the world had misread the tape all along. And then, in the very same breath, he snuck in a nasty little jab about their bedroom chemistry, as if a man who has moved on writes lines like that. A man who has moved on does not audit an ex-situationship's intimacy on a studio microphone. A man who has moved on writes about literally anything else. Every syllable stayed on beat, and every syllable pointed to a man who could not let go. And that was not the only exhibit. On another late night, Drake fired off a tracer aimed straight at A$AP Rocky's alias, "I ain't pretty Flacco, this stuff get really rocky." That is not a coincidence. That is not a bar that fell from the sky. That is a targeted, deliberate finger flick at the man Rihanna chose, from the man Rihanna did not. And when a grown, chart-topping, generation-defining artist keeps writing bars aimed at another man's household in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and into the current cycle, at some point the rest of us have to say the quiet part with our full chest, that is obsession behavior, and obsession behavior does not age well. A$AP Rocky himself, for what it is worth, has spoken on this beef with the calmest tone in the building. He said outright that he does not lose sleep over anybody who predates him in Rihanna's life, that rewinding history is not his ministry, that dwelling on a woman's past is a species of insecurity he refuses to wear. That is a grown man answer. That is somebody who understands that a partner's past is a chapter, not the whole book. And that composure, next to Drake's escalating pettiness, is a contrast so unflattering that even neutral observers cannot help but pick a side. Peep this. For anyone catching a late flight on the timeline, let me sketch out how we even got here, because the roots of this thing go deeper than most casual listeners realize. Drake has been publicly, painfully, sometimes uncomfortably fixated on Rihanna for more than a decade. Anybody who watched the VMAs remembers the moment. Drake tried to plant a kiss on Rihanna in front of a live audience of millions, and Rihanna, with the fastest reflexes ever documented at a televised awards show, pivoted her face like she had scouted the play 3 moves in advance. You just had to be there. It was the kind of clip that plays on loop in a man's head for the rest of his life, and apparently, allegedly, it is still on loop somewhere in Drake's. Then in 2017 the entire universe conspired to give Drake his shot. Rihanna reportedly let him in. They dated, however briefly. They even got matching tattoos, which for 2 celebrities of their caliber is not a casual gesture, it is a public declaration ironed onto the skin. And then, quietly, without press releases or clarifying interviews, the whole situationship dissolved. Rihanna did not put a whole album out about it. She did not host a tell-all. She simply, coldly, precisely, closed the door and said on the record that there was no friendship anymore, no enemies either, and that whatever it was what it was. Grown woman language 4, we are done, and I am not doing an autopsy on live television. And this is the part that made the internet's jury lean toward Rihanna without hesitation. Rihanna, the same Rihanna who once famously reconciled with Chris Brown after a chapter this audience does not need retold, permanently ghosted Drake. If a woman is willing to give somebody who violated her a second breath but not willing to give Drake a return text, the community is going to draw its own conclusions. And the community drew them fast. The comment section stood on business for Rihanna from day one. Now here is where the story takes its ugliest turn, because we did not have to guess what Drake had done. Drake himself, in his own words, on his own album, seemingly confessed. On the Certified Lover Boy track, Fucking Fans, a title that already sounds like a confession before the first bar even hits, Drake apologized to a woman for making her look crazy, admitting he had been out here doing exactly what she had accused him of doing, and he did it while they were together. Let the weight of that settle. Drake spent years, publicly begging, publicly writing songs, publicly showing up in the audience like a fan, publicly campaigning for Rihanna's attention. He finally got the shot. And then, according to the very lyrics he himself printed on a platinum record, he blew it by cheating with groupies. That is the villain arc writing itself. Rewind the tape and look at the geometry of the whole thing. This is a man who spent a decade acting like Rihanna was the missing piece of his life, and the moment he got a taste of it, he treated her like a hobby. And now, in 2026, with Rihanna publicly happy, publicly building a family, publicly running a business empire that has changed the beauty industry, publicly minding her own, that same man is allegedly on the other end of a phone paying bloggers to poison her happiness. If the timeline is accurate, this is not a bruised ego. This is a full-scale, subterranean smear campaign. Here is where it gets loud again. Rihanna is not a woman who fires the first shot. Rihanna will let the internet argue for weeks while she calmly does her skincare routine and runs a billion-dollar business. But do not confuse her patience for softness. Rihanna is a grade A veteran when it comes to the strategic clapback, and when she does speak, she speaks once, precisely, and she leaves scars. So when the Drake noise reached a certain decibel, Rihanna hopped on Instagram, dropped a single sentence, "None of my exes are married or in happy relationships, so it is safe to say I was not the problem, LOL," and then, with the confidence of a woman who has never lost a public exchange, she deleted it. Post, delete, mic drop. The internet screenshotted it faster than any of us can blink. That single line hit harder than an entire diss track. And what made Rihanna's clapback so devastating is that it was not just a shot at Drake. It was a diagnosis. She told the world that the pattern in her ex's post-Rihanna lives is not a coincidence. If none of them are married, none of them are happy, none of them are settled, then the common variable is not her. The common variable is the men. That math ain't mathing for Drake, and it never will. Because if Drake was truly, actually, spiritually over Rihanna, as he keeps swearing on tracks, he would not still be writing bars about her marriage, her partner, her chemistry, and her past. He would be writing bars about anything else on planet Earth. And yet here we are, 6 albums deep, still hearing him fire off tracers in her direction. If that is closure, none of us have ever seen closure. Now let's pump the brakes on the Rihanna chapter for a moment, because Sexy Red's alleged confession did not land inside a vacuum. It landed on top of a mountain of prior receipts about Drake's alleged pattern of moving funny toward black women in particular. And this is where the story stops being an isolated messy breakup and starts being an actual indictment. Cast your mind back to the Kendrick Lamar warfare. On Meet the Grahams, Kendrick did not just come for Drake's bars, his ghostwriters, or his commercial performance. Kendrick came for the shape of Drake's character. Kendrick accused Drake of hating black women, hypersexualizing them, hiding behind curated images, and keeping people around him at OVO who had rap sheets no man should be signing checks to. Kendrick rapped, verbatim, that Drake keeps alleged offenders on a monthly allowance. That line detonated. And it detonated not because it was a wild accusation, but because black women had been trying to say something similar for years, without a microphone loud enough to reach the cheap seats. Kendrick handed them the microphone. And now, with Sexy Red allegedly saying Drake is running a smear operation against a black woman as we speak, the Kendrick verse is aging like a fine, expensive, extremely unflattering wine. Zoom the lens out. Look at Megan Thee Stallion. Megan survived one of the most publicly re-traumatizing legal chapters any modern artist has ever endured. Tory Lanez is now serving a decade in prison for the shooting. That is not a rumor. That is a court verdict. And yet, in the years since, there has been an entire cottage industry of men in music quietly implying Megan lied, quietly slipping little bars into songs to muddy her name, quietly refusing to say her name in solidarity. Drake, on Circo Loco, allegedly joined that chorus with a bar that many read as questioning whether Megan was ever shot at all, and he did it while riffing on her stallion moniker, which somehow made the whole thing land dirtier. Megan responded with the composure of somebody who had been fielding this exact kind of nonsense for too long. She reminded the industry that trauma is not a punchline, that rap men love to protect each other while dogpiling on a woman who dares to speak, and that clout chasing off a real assault is a special kind of moral bankruptcy. Every syllable stayed on beat. And nobody has been able to unhear it since. And then look at Serena Williams. Serena Williams, a woman who has done nothing to anybody in the culture except win almost everything a human being can win on a tennis court, somehow caught astray from Drake on Middle of the Ocean. Drake used a bar to imply Serena's husband, Alex Ohanian, was a groupie who did not deserve to stand next to her. Alex Ohanian, refusing to be baited, calmly picked up his phone, hopped on his social media, and said with a smile that he was proud to be the #1 groupie in his wife's life and his daughter's life, and that being relentless in that role was how he kept winning. Grown man answer. Second grown man answer this story has produced in 20 minutes, and neither of them came from Drake. Here's where it gets loud one more time. Understand what a pattern actually is. A single incident is an incident. 2 incidents is a coincidence. But when you can line up Rihanna, Megan Thee Stallion, Serena Williams, and now allegedly a sabotage campaign against Rihanna's happiness in the current tabloid cycle, that is no longer a coincidence. That is a documented behavioral loop. And documented behavioral loops do not clean themselves up with one apology tour. Now clip that scene and roll to the Sexy Red chapter, because a lot of the audience is still wondering how the two of them ended up on the outs to begin with. Rewind the tape. Sexy Red and Drake, at the height of their public alliance, were operating in near lockstep. Drake pulled her on stage in New York, kissed her on the cheek in front of the entire arena, and announced to the room that his baby mama was in the building. Backstage, cameras caught him with her on his lap, kissing her all over her face, posting the moments on his Instagram stories captioning her as his rightful wife. He bought her a Cartier watch reportedly worth more than $30,000, iced out, no financing plan required, and Sexy Red thanked him publicly for the boss move. This was not a distant acquaintance. This was one of the tightest public alliances Drake had left standing, particularly after the Kendrick chapter reshaped his social circle. So when Sexy Red allegedly stepped up to the microphone and said Drake has been running a paid campaign to torpedo Rihanna's relationship, the reason the internet's jaw hit the floor is because she had every reason not to say it. That is what makes a defection different from a rumor. Defectors have receipts because they used to be in the room. Let me put a finer point on it. If the least likely person to burn a bridge with Drake is now allegedly the person holding the lighter, then the bridges around Drake are in worse structural condition than the public knows. And the pattern of Sexy Red's alleged commentary, that it is not about music, it is about a woman being sabotaged behind the scenes, pulls a much heavier moral load than a normal beef would. Meanwhile, Rihanna's life continues to make Drake's alleged campaign look absurd. Rihanna is thriving. Rihanna is building a family with a partner who publicly says, on record, that he does not care about any chapter of her life that predates him. Rihanna is running Fenty, which changed the beauty industry's shade range standard forever and forced entire competing corporations to overhaul their product lines. Rihanna is unbothered in the loud, luxurious, expensive way that only unbothered people manage to be. And meanwhile, Drake's romantic life keeps producing headlines that read less like a love story and more like a compilation reel of near misses. There was the reporting cycle a few months back suggesting he had proposed to as many as 42 different women and been turned down every single time, a number so surreal it broke the internet's calculator. Instead of quietly retreating and reassessing, Drake reportedly commissioned a diamond necklace representing those very rejections. A necklace made of rejections. On purpose. Worn in public. If a stylist ever needed a symbol of a certain kind of male stubbornness, that necklace is a trophy case of nose, catalogued in carats, hung around a neck. And this is why the audience refuses to give Drake the benefit of the doubt on the Sexy Red allegation. Because everything about his recent behavior, the bars, the necklace, the alleged proposals, the alleged sabotage, traces the same shape. It is the shape of a man who cannot lose gracefully, cannot exit a chapter gracefully, cannot let a woman be happy in a life that no longer includes him. And when a man's entire discography over 5 years traces the same shape, the community does not need a court filing to believe the newest story. The community already lived through the first 4 acts. Watch this play out from the audience's side. Fans have flooded the comment sections with 2 dominant reactions. The first is fatigue, a sighing, exhausted, "We told y'all," from black women who have been raising flags about Drake's alleged pattern for years. The second is dark humor, a wave of quote tweets pointing out that Drake will never find another Rihanna because his standards are calibrated to a version of himself he refuses to grow into. One viral reply read simply that Drake is acting like a sore loser in a game he never had a real chance at winning. Another said his obsession with Rihanna is the loudest single-payer subscription in music history. Nobody asked him to keep renewing it, but he keeps hitting confirm. And this is where the meta-question the whole internet is now asking becomes unavoidable. If the allegation is true, if Drake is really cutting checks to bloggers to plant negative stories about A$AP Rocky in Rihanna's orbit, what is the ceiling on this campaign? Because it does not stop with bloggers. Alleged smear campaigns of that scale usually involve podcast bookings, opinion columns, staged, insider, leaks, timed image releases, and even choreographed comment sections. If we are already seeing the fingerprints on the surface, what does the underground look like? That is the question no one has an answer to yet, and that is the question that guarantees this story is not over. It is barely on chapter 2. And let me flag something for the sharper viewers in the audience. Notice that at no point has Drake put out a clean, direct statement denying the sabotage claim. Not a tweet. Not an Instagram note. Not a friendly podcast damage control appearance. Silence is not a legal defense. Silence, in tabloid arithmetic, is often the loudest confession available on the menu. So where does the smoke settle? Right now it settles on 3 unavoidable truths. Truth 1, the receipts on Drake's decade-long fixation with Rihanna are stacked, time-stamped, and undeniable, straight from his own catalog. Truth 2, the pattern of alleged mistreatment toward black women in his orbit is no longer a whisper, it is a documented mosaic that stretches from Rihanna to Megan Thee Stallion to Serena Williams to now, allegedly, a sabotage plot in real time. Truth 3, the very last loyalist anybody expected to break rank has allegedly broken rank, and she did it with the confidence of a woman who saw the receipts up close. Rihanna, for her part, does not need to say another word. Her clapback is already immortalized. Her family is already thriving. Her business is already changing the industry. She has done the one thing Drake apparently cannot do, which is move on so completely that the rearview mirror does not even reflect anymore. And A$AP Rocky, if the sabotage campaign is real, is the man walking into a public storm with a partner and a family to protect, holding his composure while a shadow campaign allegedly tries to peel his image apart from the inside. If that is not the definition of the modern grown man villain arc being flipped inside out, where the villain is actually the calm one and the aggressor is the one hiding behind blog posts, then we are all reading the wrong script. So drop your verdict under this video. Do you believe Sexy Red is telling the unfiltered truth about a Drake-funded sabotage operation against Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, or do you think this is another chapter in the endless he said, she said war that has been circling this trio since 2016? Do you think Drake has an actual, documented pattern with black women in his orbit, or do you think the internet has flattened a series of unrelated incidents into a convenient villain arc? Do you think Rihanna is the strongest ex he has ever had, and is that precisely why he cannot let her walk away without a swing? Every take is welcome, every disagreement is welcome, every side eye is welcome. Only rule, bring receipts. Because make no mistake, this story is far from finished. The next chapter is already being written somewhere between a studio, a booking calendar, and a group text nobody has leaked yet. And when that chapter drops, the same audience that saw it coming today will be the first to say it out loud tomorrow. Catch me on the next spill, because I promise you the receipts are already stacking, and the next one is going to make this one look like a warm-up. Until then, stay loud in the comments, stay locked to this channel, and keep those eyes on the timeline, because in a story this messy, the next headline is never more than one weekend away.